Mae Krier, an original Rosie the Riveter, was born in 1926 in North Dakota. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Mae, her sister, and a friend headed to Seattle, Washington, where Mae became a riveter for Boeing, making B-17s and B-29s for 92 cents an hour. She met Norm, her late husband, a sailor, on the dance floor in 1944. Norm was transferred to Pasco, Washington, and in April 1945 they married. She left Boeing to work for the Army engineers with Italian prisoners of war in Pasco at 83 cents an hour. Eventually, they settled in Pennsylvania, where they raised their 2 children and where Mae still resides today. Mae joined other Rosies to get the first National Rosie the Riveter Day in 2017 and the Congressional Gold Medal for Rosie in 2020. During the pandemic, through her Facebook page, Honor Rosie, Mae, with the help of companies, groups, and individuals, made and mailed well over 6,000 red and white polka dot face masks. 5,000 went directly to her Honor Rosie followers. In 2022, her face mask and bandana were worn by Rosie the Rocketeer in the commander's seat of the Boeing Starliner, which traveled to the International Space Station and back. Mae continues to travel the world to promote Rosie the Riveter's legacy, and at 98 years, Mae still cuts her own grass. Now it's time to join Breaking Barriers with Mae Krier. Hello, Mae.
Hi, Deb. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm good. Thank you for all you do for us too, Deb. Let's start with that.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. And today we're going to have representatives from 2 different groups that help to continue Rosie's legacy. They're Rosebuds, which means they are related to a Rosie. Is that right, Mae?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to bring our first guest on, Bette Kenward. She's the Michigan director of the American Rosie the Riveter Association. Welcome, Bette.
Thank you.
Good morning,
Happy to
Betty.
be here. Hi.
How I admire you. I just think it's wonderful what you do, what you're doing for us. We could have done this. Rosie the Riveter couldn't have got to where we are without people like you, Betty, you and Jeannette. I mean, all of you do so much to, like I said, it's important to keep our legacy alive. And God knows you're doing a wonderful job.
Well, you're an inspiration to all of us, truly.
But Betty, there's so many things we want to know about you in Michigan. You invited me up there. I'm not sure whether it was you or Jeannette when you had the Guinness Book of Records. Do you remember that there? Well, that was so amazing. I was just stunned. I've had such good memories about it ever since. I'd like to have you tell us how that came about and what all about it, if you will.
So the Guinness World Book of Records was actually a friendly little rivalry between California and Michigan. And so we were always out to compete with them, just as they were out to compete with us. The first time we only had a few Rosies. The second time we had a little more. We had 700 and I think it was 74 Rosies. They took us on and they beat us, but I graciously went out to California to help them win that little bet that we had going with them, because it was all in fun. That's how we were honoring Rosie's legacy. And so when I came back, we had another really big one, and we rented the whole area of the college. So it was huge. When you look at that picture, there's a lot of people there. There were over 3,000 people in that attendance, and 57 of them were Rosies, which was in itself a record. And that was pretty amazing, getting to be with all of you and sharing in your stories. It was just so much fun. So many family members. It was a blast. And having both you and Phyllis there inspiring us, that just made it even more perfect.
And you know, it's amazing, Betty, as how Debbie Dingle, how your representative is so supportive of you. I think that is nice. I met her there, then I met her in Washington when you took your group down to Washington.
Yes.
On your honor flight group, I met her there that day again. And I'm sure that she's a great part in what you've been able to accomplish.
She loves the Rosies. She herself, to me, we always call her that she's our modern day Rosie, because she inspires and she loves you guys so much. She will do anything for you. Whenever we call upon her to help, she never says no to us. She's just an amazing person inside and out.
And I think that's where did I meet you, Betty? Was that in Kansas City?
Absolutely. And I will never forget that day as long as I live, because I remember walking into the lobby and you talking to me. And I said to my friend that we were on the flight together, I said, was she a real Rosie? She looks too young. And she's so spry and springy. And I will never forget that as long as I live. You are just an amazing lady, and I adore you.
Well, you know, Betty, Mother Nature's catching up to me now. I've been getting so many beautiful invites, but I got to think twice about where I go or how I go, because my knee's starting to give out. But, you know, I'm going to be 99 this month. And I said, you know, Mother Nature has stopped telling me something, but I haven't got my knee, but I've got my mouth, Betty. I can still use my mouth.
Randy, can you put up picture number 3 again so we can see all of the Rosie, the Guinness Book of Records, picture 3. And we didn't see it quite long enough. There we go.
That's
what year was this?
Pardon?
Do you know what year was this? Do you remember?
It says right on the bottom, and I think it's 2017.
Okay.
Right. It is. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? That was an amazing day. It was so funny. I tried to reach somebody. I was kidding them because I said, "Where are you?" And she was in the hallway back somewhere. But it was funny. We enjoyed it. It was an amazing day.
So the Rosies are right in the. If you kind of look at that picture and you see the stage, they're the first 4 rows. And it's kind of the darkest area that you can see in that picture. Their guardians are with them as well, so that's kind of why that whole area is a really big area.
Isn't it amazing that there was several Rosies there, but how few were still able to come to Washington for our congressional ceremony? That was a shame.
Brandy, put up picture number 4 so we can see the honor flight that was more recent, please.
And Betty, you're such a role model. I think it's just wonderful. Your personality. Oh, I loved that day when you brought your honor flight down to Washington, included me. Look at there I am sitting in the back seat.
Yeah, there you are.
We held hands that day. I wished I'd had more time to meet more of them. You know, you can't. It's such a fast-moving times or these days. I have to meet Delphina now. I met her in Washington, but that was so much going on. It was such a flighty time. You know, you just didn't have time to talk, to just sit down to get to know each other. That's amazing. This is amazing what you just did to get the honor flight for women. That's outstanding, because that's the first one I know. I work with our honor flight all the time. I mean, I'm there for them. They include me in their programs and things like that. But I never thought, well, there's not enough women Rosies in our area to do anything like that. But that's amazing what you did there. That took a lot of know-how to do that.
Well, it was a promise I made. It was a mission I knew I had to do. And I was determined to do it. And with the help of wonderful Debbie Dingle and the Boeing Company, we made it happen.
Excellent.
All right, so that was amazing, just amazing. I see you and Delphina on the end, and I wish that I had more time to talk to her. She's really a live wire. Look at her, how healthy she is. She's a year older than I am, and she's in better health. I'm in good health, but like I said, my knee's giving out. But so many of us, we have that problem. And our ego, I don't want to get in the chair. And that's a shame because our ego gets in our way, So,
Well,
but
Maxine is number 4 from the left. She just turned 101. And
I heard.
let's see, where's
Who
Frank?
did? Who turned?
Pardon?
Oh, is it Betty who turned 101?
Maxine, she's the number 1, 2, 3, 4 from the left. And then Fran, I'm trying to see where she is in the picture. Fran is next to Maxine, so she's number 3. She's turning 103 this week.
I've seen pictures of her. Is that her daughter behind her?
Behind Fran, yes.
Yeah, beside you, Betty. Yeah, I didn't get any time to talk to him down in Washington. There was so much going on.
Oh, there was. It was
Yeah,
awesome.
during the congressional thing. That was nice. But that was nice that Boeing invited me to that, too. That was the day I got my face mask. I've been up in space. They gave them back to me that day. And, there's talk of them putting them in the museum. I haven't heard any more about that. But that would be nice, too.
Yes.
Everything we do to honor Rosies, and we're bit by bit, all of us are going to be gone in a few years. I said, it's so amazing that we have you, Betty, and you, Jeannette, that are carrying on our legacy. That is outstanding. And I hope in your planning, when your time comes, I hope you plan to leave it behind with your generation too.
Oh.
So let me ask a question. Thank you, Brandy. You can take that one down. How many people are in your organization?
So I had to make sure I double checked all of this. We have currently 4,930 that are non-deceased, because some members that are Rosies are joined at deceased, meaning like my grandmother was joined at deceased. There's 614 of those members are listed as Rosies.
Okay, so do people who join, do they have to be rosebuds to join?
Absolutely not. You can be a Rosie friend.
A Rosie friend. Gotcha.
Our congressman, after our congressional gold medal, our congressman had me get together Rosies that I could, but I don't have Rosies in my area. They're all passed away now. And when he had that ceremony, he honored the families of those who had passed away. He gave them medals and flags. And you can imagine the tears, how important that was to the families to know that their mother or grandmother was still honored for what she did during World War II. These are important to us, very important. And you're the ones that are doing this for us. And we really thank you for it.
And Brandy, can you put up the second picture? And Betty, tell us about your grandmother.
My grandmother was really quite special, just like all grandmothers are, I suppose. But I never knew that she was a Rosie until she was already gone. My mom is who told me that she was a Rosie. And believe it or not, my mom's birthday is the same day as May, which is Rosie the Riveter Day. And so I learned that my grandmother worked at a factory called Bud Wheel. At Bud Wheel, they did the 155 millimeter shells and rockets. She did the fuses on that. Those Rosies are actually called WOWs, and those were the women ordnance workers because they worked with munitions.
Huh.
Betty,
Pardon?
can I comment on that? When I first started doing this, when I was determined to get Rosie recognized, that was 40 or 50 years ago. Most people didn't even know who Rosie the Riveter was at that time. But the sad part of it was the women didn't know they were Rosie. They thought that they didn't fall under that umbrella. And I told them just because I put rivets in that B-17 or B-29, we couldn't have got that plane off the ground had it not been for what you did in a small factory somewhere around in our country. Maybe you made the engine, maybe you made the electrical system, maybe you made the tires. They didn't know that their job was just as important as mine. We couldn't have got that plane off the ground had it not been for what they did. And that took a lot of doing to make these Rosies these women realize that their job was just as important as anyone else's.
Thank you, Brandy. So I guess you do this in memory of your grandmother and all of the Rosies, and you've built quite an organization to keep this legacy going, which is what Mae does every day. We do Zooms, we do interviews with students we're going to do one for National History Day, so thank you for what you do.
Oh my
Well,
God.
Betty, it's like Deb. There's a good example of Deb. She said, my mother drove an ambulance. I didn't realize that she was a Rosie until, we talked. I made the best friends from a lady from Vermont. Her son had heard me say something around the Philadelphia area. He heard something about me, and I got a hold of his mother. She did it, even though she worked in an office, she worked in Flushing shipyards in New York during the war. She had a very important job. She had no idea that she fell under that umbrella as being a Rosie. Ended up, we became good friends. One day she came down to visit me. It's so nice, the people you meet. We got a wonderful world of people. It's just a matter of reaching out. Well, who would know better than you? You're so active. But it's a matter of reaching out. I mean, I think it's marvelous, the people that we have in our country.
Well, that's why I do what I do too, because as not ever being able to honor my grandmother, every time I look at one of you guys, one of you Rosies, I see her face. Every time I meet a Rosebud or a Rivet, who is a male descendant of a Rosie, a 21st century Rosie, a Rosie friend, or a Rosie volunteer. Those are all the different categories of membership that we have. Every time I see one of them, it's so important to me that I take the time to honor their Rosie, because
how important that is to
Pardon?
How important it is to us too, Betty. I mean, we don't want to be forgotten. Our time is running out, and you were the generation who's going to keep our memories alive. When they had that program with the Congressman Fitzpatrick, you can't imagine how many of those people in tears we seen that day because they thought their mothers or their grandmothers had been forgotten. And like you, I think that's so nice that you remembered your grandmother and you're looking into her history and what she did. We didn't talk about it. We didn't think it was important at the time, but it is so important what we did, and we deserve the honor we've just received with the Congressional Gold Medal.
And we have the honor wall at the Michigan Flight Museum, which has the plaques of all the different Rosies, what they did and where they worked, which has the poem that Donalene wrote. You remember that poem about They Were Rosies, right? It's a beautiful poem, and I always read it at every presentation I do, even with children, because it kind of speaks about all the different jobs that Rosie's did, all the sacrifices she made, and why we're doing what we're doing to honor their legacy and make sure that their stories are always told.
Could you send that poem to me? I would like to post it on Honor Rosie.
I can, definitely.
Okay.
I have it right here, actually, if you want me to read it real quick to you.
Yeah, real quick.
Okay. They were Rosies. They were daughters, mothers, sisters, wives, and grandmothers. They were Rosies. They worked as riveters, buckers, sanders, welders, crane operators, bus drivers, uniform makers, bullet makers, parachute folders, clerical workers, shipyard workers, assembly line workers, Red Cross, and so much more. They were Rosies. They came from all over our country. They came from small towns and big cities. They came from Washington to Florida, from Michigan to Texas, from Maine to California, and everywhere in between. They were Rosies. They were teenagers, young adults, and senior citizens, and they came together with one purpose: to help win the war. They built 80,000 landing craft, 100,000 tanks, 300,000 aircraft, 15 million guns, and 41 billion rounds of ammunition. They were Rosies, and they were more than women working together. They had to raise their children and worry about their loved ones overseas. They were Rosies. And after all these years, will anyone remember that they were Rosies? You betcha, Mae. We'll never forget that you guys were Rosies.
Thank you, Betty. Please send that to me. I'd love to have it.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's such an honor to talk to you again, Betty. I love you,
Thank you.
women, what you've done, what you're doing for us. Thank you.
Thank
We
you
love
so much.
Mae.
Huh?
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. And our next guest is Jeannette, who is the executive director of the Rosie the Riveter Association of Michigan. It's another volunteer organization dedicated to preserving the legacy of Rosie. Welcome, Jeannette.
Hi there, Deb. Hey, Mae. It's good to see
Hi,
you.
Jeannette. Good to see you. And
Yeah.
I've just seen your new post, but your pretty picture, boy, it's beautiful. Your new picture on Facebook.
Oh, gosh.
You're beautiful. I showed you my card. You can't believe it.
Hey, if you
She
need
said,
more, let me know.
you must have sent me 2,000 of these, I believe. I know I still have it due. It'll see my lifetime. But you can't imagine where they went and how I've thought of you since then. I even cut out parts of them and put them on envelopes and things.
Well, yep.
It's amazing time. And Jeannette, are you involved in that museum too? When I was up there that time when they was invited for that Guinness record, you were just building that. They were just finishing that museum, or that I think they were pouring the concrete on the floor at the time when we were there. Are you involved? Tell us about that. That was interesting.
Yeah, that was exciting. That was actually how I got involved as a Rosie volunteer back in 2013 as part of my career in advertising, which I'm happily retired now. But as part of my career in advertising, I was part of the campaign team that was trying to save the bomber plant. So all of the messaging and the publicity, and it was at a publicity event that we were putting on, and I was involved in organizing for that event, that we had the Living Rosies come to the publicity press event. And that was where I first met the Rosie the Riveters, and I fell in love with you women. I absolutely fell in love with you. And this is before I realized my own mom was considered a Rosie the Riveter. I just fell in love with these amazing women. And then I, got involved as a volunteer. And so I've worked as a volunteer in the Rosie space for a dozen years now, I guess, in various capacities with various organizations. And really, in those dozen years, the most important thing I've learned is that
That picture.
Yeah, Rosie presentations, like where my organization is really, really focused on education and educating Rosie, or educating folks deeply about Rosie the Riveter and women in World War II. So, but the most important thing I learned about Rosie the Riveter is, even though it is a national story and it played out on the world stage during World War II, what actually happened locally in the individual states, in the local factories, in the local communities, and with the local women who came to work in the factories. So by being the Michigan Rosies, an independent Michigan-based organization, I feel we are uniquely positioned to reach into our local communities and to draw out that history and to find the local living Rosie the Riveters, and to find the families of the Rosies that still have those stories and reminiscences about their family Rosies. And likewise, when it comes to honor and celebration and bringing the Rosie story, that also happens locally too. So we partner with community organizations, the local historical societies, Historical Society of Michigan, the Motor Cities National Heritage Area, Automotive Hall of Fame. We partner with these local historical societies to connect them with that World War II history and find out about it and highlight Rosie's role within it. So, as a Michigan-based organization, we are uniquely positioned to make all of that happen.
That's awesome.
Well, Jeannette, when I think of you, I think of your pugs, your pug pillows, or pug dogs.
Yeah, I hope you can't hear her barking. She was barking earlier.
Yeah, we really had that was a cute
Yeah,
That was a cute we had. Were you involved when when we came to Michigan for like we talked with Betty about that when they had the Guinness Book of Records of you made the were you involved in that too, Jeannette?
Yeah, I was involved. I was still working in advertising then.
I can't remember you or Betty who had invited me up. Do you remember?
Probably Betty. She was in charge of getting, rallying the World War II Rosies to come to the event. And I was more in charge of the publicity and the advertising. And like the whole point of that event was to raise awareness and money to save what was left of that bomber plant at Willow Run.
I know you've both done so much and you work so well. And it's a wonder you can't. I couldn't remember exactly how the two of you work together. I remember Kate Weiss was the one that picked us up, and she just took us everywhere. I remember going to the Bomber restaurant. That was fun going there. And you remember the Royal Oaks? They had something going on at Royal Oaks. That was I forget the day that took us there. But there's so many nice things that have gone on between you women. I just think it's fantastic what the two of you are doing. I mean, it's amazing because we don't realize, us older women, in Washington, I heard one woman say, could you imagine this ever happening? And I said, well, it took a lot of work from a lot of people to bring that together. And it was amazing. I thought that in our honor down in Washington. But it's two people like you that, bring us forward. If it wasn't for people like you, Rosie wouldn't get the publicity, wouldn't get the credit that she's getting. And naturally, like we promote the women, now look what you're doing to promote women and make young girls realize how capable they are. They didn't realize it until people make them, talk to them. Like you.
Yeah, and they don't realize how much you guys open the door. So we're just, a lot of us, me, Betty,
Now, Betty, Jeannette, do you go to schools, or how do I see, you share the same Rosies? I mean, do some of the Rosies belong to both groups? Is that it?
Yeah. Yep, some of the Rosies belong to both groups. And I was just talking to Rosie Delphine, who is pictured there in the middle. I was just talking to her and her daughter right before I went on the podcast. And I told them, I'm going to be on a podcast with Mae. And so Delphine says hi to you. She loves you. And she loves you. And so maybe, maybe sometime soon you guys will get to meet.
Well, so she's a sweetheart, but I didn't know who she was. Everybody talks about her, well, how nice she was. She liked, even Tammy, she right away, she said, get Delphina when I was looking for Rosies for Washington. It's so cute because she's really, really well liked. And that's nice. Yeah, and I didn't realize that was her daughter. Well, this is what's so nice to see what you women are doing. Like I said, one of the things I remember at Royal Oak, now this was an affair where we went to, I wish I remembered the lady that took us. I can't remember. She was in Washington with us, but they were taking pictures of the men in the back of the room. And they finally come and got Phil Snye, and one man said, what are these women doing in here? I turned to him and I said, had it not been for us women, you might not even be here. And, shut him up really fast because the men don't give the women the credit they deserve. I mean, even to this day, the World War II men think they did win. They were in the trenches, but they couldn't have won that war had it not been for what we did. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So the way past do it that to give women the credit we deserve.
Absolutely. And that brings to mind one man who's very close to my heart and is part of my group and activities. And he's a World War II veteran named George. He's a nose gunner on a B-24 bomber. And he loves the Rosies and he loves seeing you guys celebrated. And at an event where you guys are being honored and celebrating, I mean, I always like to bring honor to him because he's, the reason bringing him home alive was the reason you guys were doing it. But he always says, those gals deserve all the credit and we could not have done it without them. So he's very appreciative.
Well, I went to Normandy with the best defenses last time. I was to Normandy for the 75th and again for the 80th. And one of the articles that came out afterward, they interviewed a man from, I think it was in South Dakota, I forget where. They asked him who his favorite thing or person was during the ceremony or during the trip. He said, Rosie the Riveter. I thought that was amazing. That was cute because we still do have influence on people. I mean, the men from World War II, a lot of them, they still don't want to admit that, that what the women did was important. They do. Most of them do. They're good. But, it was still a man's world back then. And I mean, we've changed.
And
Continued
it a little bit. We got to keep working on that.
Jeannette, didn't you tell me that you were a rosebud? Who was Rosie in your life?
So both of my parents were members of the World War II Greatest Generation. And I am so proud of my dad, who was a World War II combat veteran. He fought in the Battle of Okinawa, and he was one of the first troops ashore in occupied Japan. And my mom was a volunteer Rosie the Riveter in Canada. She worked for the Canadian Red Cross, putting together, as a volunteer, putting together prisoner of war packages, care packages for the Canadian POWs. And growing up in the 1960s and the early 1970s as a kid, World War II and parents' involvement in that was just taken for granted. Everyone's dad was in World War II. And then as far as your mom having been a Rosie the Riveter or helped in some capacity during the war, they didn't even talk about it. I just didn't think it was anything worth talking about, or it was a big deal. And I know when I first met those Rosies for the first time a dozen years ago in 2013, they were all kind of like, well, what's all the fuss about? I didn't do anything that everybody else didn't do. And they're so modest, and they're just genuinely puzzled as to why people are considering them heroes. But I think like a dozen more years into it, like, Mae and Delphine and, some of the Rosies that I work with, I think they're kind of more used to it now, and they understand how they paved the way. They understand how they really helped win the war, and they understand how they paved the way for women of my generation and subsequent generations. And I think now they're kind of used to the attention, and they're pretty proud of what they did, as they should be.
And we won't see that generation again.
No, they were the greatest. The greatest generation, hands down. Hands down.
I always tell the story of my mother. I think she was probably one of the very, very first Rosies. When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, I was just a teenager, but we were in a small town. Every one of our young men enlisted immediately. And of course, it just took the heart out of our community because we were so small to start with. And my uncle decided to enlist too. And he was a rural mail carrier where he took the mail out in the country, I think twice or three times a week, I forget. But he enlisted also. Well, now that was federal at the time, and they needed somebody to replace that right away. There was no electric or anything out in the country at that time. And you know how severe those Midwestern winters used to be. You'll realize what a challenge that was for a woman. And they gave that job to my mother. And she didn't think anything of it. It had to be done. It had to be, that was the way of her life at the time. And I can remember when she'd if there'd be a blizzard or something, the farmers could sort of timed her. They'd come looking for her, maybe on a horse or a tractor. But I think about what I went through, unbelievable. But it had to be done. And that was the way of back then. And that, of course, that was in the 1941, but then times were starting to get better for us. But we lived through some rough times out in the Middle West. Well, everybody did at that time. It was a Great Depression and Dust Boom. Very poor times. But you know what? We're survivors, and I'm glad it made me strong.
Your generation is amazing.
Well, another thing, Jeannette, too, you're so thankful for everything. It's a different generation. Now, we didn't expect anything for nothing. I mean, we worked hard just to put food on the table.
Yeah.
And nowadays, we're responsible for spoiled kids because we want to make up for what we didn't have, and we spoil them, which is a mistake, but it's normal for grandparents to give what the mothers don't give them, the grandparents do, that kind of thing.
Right.
I experienced that.
But Jeannette, is there anything else you would like us to know about your group?
Well, We at the Michigan Rosies are committed to honoring the real Rosie the Riveters of World War II and preserving their legacy. And our focus, or our 3 goal sets in doing that, are 1, honoring and celebrating the real Rosies of World War II and their friends of World War II veterans, both living and past, and in educating, really deeply educating folks about Rosie the Riveter and World War II history and how it played out here in Michigan, and in engaging our local communities with their own World War II and Rosie the Riveter heritage. So those are our 3 service areas.
It's wonderful, wonderful. Mae, do you have any last words?
What was that, Deb?
You have anything? We're going to have to wrap it up. You have anything else you'd like to say? Okay, well, we didn't get to say goodbye to Jeannette, but thank you. Here she comes.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. That was a good show, Mae. I enjoyed it.
Oh, I did too. They're 2 wonderful women. I mean, it's so nice that they both got their organization. They can run their organization. As far as I can see, there's not competitive. They just do what has to be done. And I think it's just us. They each work in different ways, which is what we should do. And like Jeannette with her education, I love that, where she's been there, talking to teachers and getting the people educated about it. And Bette, what she does. They're 2 amazing women. Just amazing. And I'm proud that I know them. And I've known them for quite a few years.
Well, without your friends, Mae, there would be no breaking barriers with Mae Krier.
You know what? There's a lot of wonderful people out there, Deb. You and I have experienced that with our face masks. Look at what we've experienced with that.
Don't say that word. Don't say face mask to me. But yes, you're right. You're right.
I'm talking about bandanas now.
I know you are.
I want you to. I want them to realize what you've done for Rosie the Riveter. I think it's fantastic. Let me tell you a little story about Deb. When my face mask was viral, Deb says to me, I had met Deb at the Freedom Foundation in Valley Forge, but she said, Mae, can I help you? She had no idea what she was getting into. My God, she's been working for.
I soon found out. Well, it was a good podcast, Mae. I think we're ready to power up now, right?
Hey, we can do that.
We can do it. Power up.
Yeah, we did it, and we can do it.
Try to be kind, everybody. If you can, be kind. It's all we've got. Bye-bye, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.